Welcome to another episode of the Lyceum of History, the Indo-European language family. Our video goals today are to look at what was Proto-Indo-European, what were the major branches of this language family, and English comes from the Germanic branch. Our goal today is to look at the practical knowledge and application of the Indo-European language family and what its history means for you. We're not going to go very in-depth into the actual linguistics behind it. Instead, we're going to focus on the practical aspects of it. The most popular theory is called the Kurgan hypothesis. Proto-European was a language spoken in the area north of the Black and Caspian Seas between 4500 and 2500 BC. And you can see that area is the magenta on the map to the left. That's today mostly Russia. So who were these people? They were nomadic, which means they moved around from place to place. They were pastoralists, which means they raised livestock. They lived in the steppes and spread their language through both migrations and conquest. The word Kurgan comes from a Russian word for a type of burial mound. You can see that in the picture in the top left. How do we know they moved around so much? Archaeological evidence of both horse domestication and the use of the wheel facilitated easy travel. You can see a reconstructed wagon in the image in the top right and a cave drawing sketch on the bottom left. We've also analyzed genetic evidence and the spread of specific Y-DNA haplogroups. So how do we know this? There was a man named Sir William Jones who was a British judge in India. In an address to the Asiatic Society in 1786, he said the following: "The Sanskrit, or language of ancient India, language, whether it be its antiquity, is of wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either, yet bearing to both of them a stronger affinity, both in the roots of verbs and the forms of grammar, that could possibly have been produced by accident. So strong indeed that no philologer's study of languages could examine them all three without believing them to have come from some common source, which perhaps no longer exists." This guy knew his stuff. At the time of his death in 1794, he knew 13 languages thoroughly and had a working knowledge of 28 additional languages. So when he said that Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin all seemed to come from the same source, people took notice. As this original group began to migrate out and continued to spread into multiple directions, each group over time gradually evolved and created their own language family. You can think of Proto-Indo-European as the trunk of the tree and the major branches as the language families. And some examples are Romance, which includes Spanish, French, Italian; Germanic, which includes English and German; Slavic, which includes Russian, and so on. You also have the Celtic family, Iranian, Indo-Aryan, Albanian, Armenian, and Greek. We even have several that are extinct languages that no longer are spoken. And as you can see on the map, Indo-European language family dominates Europe and even much of Asia. In fact, today, about 46% of the world's population speaks an Indo-European language as its primary language. Proto-Indo-European, abbreviated P.I.E, was a very inflected language. Inflection is when you add something to a word to change its grammatical function. In fact, P.I.E had 8 noun cases. You can see this in examples for horse. We won't go into what each noun case means, but you can see how there was different ways to say horse depending on what the horse was doing in the sentence. You have equos, eque, equum, equosio, equoi, equod, equoi, and equo. Modern English doesn't do this anymore. Instead, modern English uses word order and prepositions to determine the meaning in a sentence. Although this is not true of all modern Indo-European languages. So how do we know this? We have no written evidence of Proto-Indo-European. But what we do have are what's called cognates. And cognate comes from a Latin word, co, which means together, ignatus, which means born. So if we look at words, we can see they're cognates, or they're related. And this study began in the 19th century to try to better understand Proto-Indo-European. So if you look at, for example, Proto-Indo-European word one, oi, which is in English one, Old German eins, Latin unus, Greek heis, Sanskrit ekos, you'll really see it number 2. In English we say two, but in Proto-Indo-European it was du, in Old German, twee, Latin, duo, Greek duo, and Sanskrit dva. And again, with three, you can see as well that these words are all very similar and seem to have sprung from a common source. It doesn't always guarantee they're cognates, but they certainly can be. We can also look at family terms, which tend to change the least. If we look at Proto-Indo-European and compare it to English, Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, Iranian, Celtic, we can see some familiarities. We have mater, which became mother, mater, meter, mater, matar, and matir. Same with father. Fiter, father, pater, patir, pitar, pitar, athar. And same with brother. So again, we can look at these cognates and see that there are some similarities, and that's what we do. You can do this and go back and reconstruct the past to figure out what Proto-Indo-European might have looked and sounded like. Now you will notice some changes. For example, English father is the only word in that list that starts with an F instead of a P. And some of those other changes, like T to TH, are specific to English. And again, when these language families spread out, each evolved slowly over time, and each had language shifts that are for another video. If you look at the Germanic language family, it evolved from Proto-Indo-European and was spoken circa the 5th to 1st centuries BC. And over time, that group spread out, and slowly those languages evolved into three main groups: the North Germanic languages, the West Germanic, and the East Germanic languages, of which the latter is extinct. And it's in the West Germanic languages we have English. And you can see in the map, the magenta is on the left is the Germanic homeland, and the map in the middle is the major Germanic languages spoken today. And the same thing happened with the other major branches of the Indo-European language family. In fact, the same thing's happening right now. Languages are constantly evolving. In fact, today there are about 445 Indo-European languages still spoken today, which is roughly 46% of the planet. And that doesn't include those that speak an Indo-European language as a secondary language. To summarize, Proto-Indo-European was theorized to have been spoken on the Pontic steppe north of the Black and Caspian Seas, about 4500 to 2500 BC. The use of the horse and the wheel allowed for rapid travel, and over time each group that spread out, their language evolved into a different major language families, which in turn evolved even more. English derives from the Germanic language family. Today, about 46% of the world speaks an Indo-European language today, or about 445 languages. Thank you so much for watching this video from the Lyceum of History. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing for more videos from the Lyceum of History.